Pretending to be asleep saved my life. A simple childhood deception became the shield between me and an unimaginable horror, and this is the story of that night. It's the story of the long, dark shadow it cast over the following years, a shadow that accompanies me every day as I try to piece my life back together from the fragments of my past. Today I am 19, but the memory from when I was 10 is burned into my mind. I remember the cold of that winter in 2013 when my biggest concerns were video games and what my friends thought of me. My family went to bed early, something that embarrassed me, so my little act of rebellion was to stay awake, lost in the digital world of my phone. That night, like so many others, I was engrossed in a game. I had become a master at the art of feigning sleep, slowing my breath and stilling my body whenever my parents got up. It was a game within a game, but that night, the game changed. I heard footsteps on the stairs, heavy but trying to be quiet. It's Dad, I thought. The sound was familiar. I turned off the phone, hid under the blanket, and waited. Barely a few seconds later, a silhouette appeared at my door. It stood motionless, watching in the darkness for 3 long seconds, and then left. I felt immense relief. Great, I can play a little longer. I was about to return to my fantasy world when a sound broke the silence of the house. It wasn't a normal sound. It was a dull, muffled noise coming from my parents' room, a sound that didn't fit, that chilled the blood. My child's mind couldn't comprehend it. It wasn't a noise of everyday life, it was something wrong. A pure, cold fear began to spread through my chest, erasing all trace of sleep or the desire to play. My heart was beating in my ears, a dull drum against the oppressive silence. Their bedroom door was ajar, a crack of darkness that seemed to call to me. It wasn't curiosity I felt anymore. It was a primal instinct, an alarm screaming that the world I knew was about to shatter. I got up, not to spy on an adult secret, but because a deep part of me knew I had to understand what that sound was, what that terrible wrongness in the calm of my home was. I got out of bed, and being as silent as possible, I approached my parents' room, crouched and stuck to the door. I peeked in, hoping to be able to see something and brag about it in the schoolyard. Please don't judge me. And what I saw, I remember vividly, a shadow of a big man with what looked like a machete, hitting what seemed to be 2 pillows, somewhat hard. And I was paralyzed watching and hearing those dry blows, and instantly I knew they were not pillows, they were my parents. I did not cry, nor did I even sigh. Nothing. I didn't even have the courage to let out the air that was in my lungs. I was completely frozen. My brain gave me an electric shock or something like that. And I came back to myself. I could hear my heart beating at a speed that I didn't even feel in physical education classes, I guess my instinct told me. Go back to your room right now, or you will die. And without thinking, I obeyed it. I returned to my room with more caution than I had left. It was hard to breathe, and my heart was pounding. I stood still, looking at a fixed point, without thinking about anything, again, frozen. My brain again gave me another one of those shocks when I heard the blows cease. I felt a shiver, and at that moment, I felt that the best option was to pretend to be asleep. So I got into bed making almost no noise, and I closed my eyes. I could feel my heart beating at a speed, I repeat, that I have never felt again. The beats were thundering in my head until I heard the footsteps again. And at that moment, I felt that my ears sharpened, trying to know the exact position of the stranger. I noticed that he was coming towards my room. I did not open my eyes, even though I was with my back to the door. But I could feel that he was there, looking at me, standing in the doorway. I wanted to cry and scream, but I couldn't. My most primitive instincts were in charge of my body at that moment. After a few long seconds of agony, I heard him go down the stairs. I didn't move a muscle. I didn't even open my eyes. As I told you, I couldn't. I could hear footsteps on the floor below, and after no more than a minute, I heard him go up the stairs again, this time more slowly. I didn't understand why. I supposed he was coming from the living room, from the footsteps I had heard. I quickly noticed that he was inside my room, not in the doorway, but inside. I heard the footsteps behind me. I knew he was there, 3 hand spans away. I could feel his presence and his breathing, somewhat accelerated but calm. I noticed that he left the room and went to my parents. He came back, and this time I noticed his breathing stronger, as if he was making an effort. This was repeated 2 times. I was still completely immobile. I hadn't moved a single muscle, and my brain was showing me a map of the house. And by the footsteps, I could know where the stranger was at all times. I developed powers, obviously caused by adrenaline. It's true what they say, in moments like that, is where you really see the human in its purest state. A dense silence invaded the room. I still felt his presence. I knew he was looking at me. I could feel it. I noticed that he approached me, and again, I heard his breathing right behind me. Suddenly, I heard him touch or caress the wall of my room. It was a textured wall, which in my country, Spain, was quite popular years ago. After a while, hearing that rough sound, I heard him leave the room and go down the stairs. I heard him go into the living room, and I didn't hear anything more. I remained motionless, without opening my eyes and without sleeping. I don't know how long. I lost track of time. I had been a long time without hearing a single step or trace that there was someone else in the house. I gathered my courage, with my heart pounding. I opened my eyes very, very slowly. I could clearly see the light blue wall of my room. It was daytime, but the sun was not yet shining. I guessed it would be 7 or 8 in the morning. I kept looking at the wall for a good while with my eyes open. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to check if it had all been a dream, or if it had been real. Everything was weird. At that time, my parents were already talking while having breakfast. The silence that remained afterward was the worst part. More terrifying than the heavy footsteps or the bated breath I heard on the other side of my door. I stayed motionless, curled up under the sheets, holding my breath until my lungs burned. I didn't know how much time had passed, but the house was deathly silent. Finally, I gathered the courage to move, to look, not to see what I feared, but to know if the nightmare was over. My bedroom door was ajar, and a sliver of light from the hallway illuminated the floor. I got out of bed, my bare feet cold on the wood. As I looked down the hall, I saw my parents' bedroom door wide open. Inside, everything was chaos and shadows, furniture overturned against the wall like fallen giants. A shiver ran down my spine, but I didn't dare get any closer. I turned around, intending to return to the false safety of my bed, and that's when I saw it. On the blue, textured wall of my own room, right next to the door, was a message written in a dark, sinister red substance. I know you are awake. The scream that tore from my throat was not that of a child. It was something older, an animalistic sound filled with a terror so pure I felt it could shatter the windows. My eyes were fixed on that message, those 5 words that turned my survival into a curse. The intruder hadn't missed me. He had seen me, had chosen to let me live, and that thought was more terrifying than anything else. I don't know how long I screamed, but eventually the rising sound of a distant siren answered my call. I remember the front door breaking open and the hurried footsteps of people running up the stairs. A police officer was the first to enter my room. His face went pale at the sight, but his eyes landed on me. A small boy standing in the middle of the room, pointing a trembling finger at the wall. He didn't ask questions. He simply wrapped me in a blanket and guided me out of the room, shielding my eyes as he led me downstairs away from that house. The following days were a blur of compassionate faces and a profound silence where my parents' voices used to be. I was taken to live with my aunt and uncle. I spoke to the police, but my memories were fragmented. The only detail I could offer with certainty was the message on the wall. They never caught him. He became a ghost in my life, a shadow lurking at the edge of my vision. I started therapy with a soft-spoken woman who encouraged me to talk, but the words were trapped behind a wall of fear. Instead, I would draw, filling page after page with images of dark rooms, looming figures, and walls covered in angry red letters. Sleep became my greatest enemy. For every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that room, feigning sleep while a real monster breathed just behind me, and I would often wake up screaming, drenched in a cold sweat, my heart hammering against my ribs with the same ferocity it had on that night. My aunt and uncle would rush to my room, their faces etched with worry, and they would sit with me until the sun came up, their presence a small comfort against the vast, terrifying darkness of my own mind. As the years passed, the sharp, stabbing pain of my grief began to dull into a constant, throbbing ache, a part of me that I learned to live with, like a chronic illness, and I slowly built a new life for myself, a life constructed around the gaping hole where my family used to be. I was a quiet teenager, overly cautious and fiercely private, with an obsession with locked doors and windows that my friends found amusing, but which I knew was a necessary ritual for my sanity. The message, "I know you were awake," became a constant refrain in my head, a question that echoed through my every waking moment. Why did he let me live? Was it a moment of twisted pity, a game, or was it a promise? A promise that one day he would return for me. This uncertainty was the true prison, for a captured enemy is a known quantity, but an enemy who lurks in the shadows, an enemy who holds your life in his hands for reasons you cannot comprehend, is a source of endless, gnawing terror. I went through the motions of life. I did well in school. I even made a few close friends who knew a vague, sanitized version of my story, but I never let anyone get too close, for how could I explain the darkness that lived inside me, the constant, hyper-vigilant state of being, the way I tracked every sound in a room, the way I could map out a space with my eyes closed, a skill born from that night of adrenaline-fueled survival. My therapist called it post-traumatic stress, a label that felt too small, too clinical for the all-consuming reality of my existence, and I often felt like a fraud, playing the part of a normal person while secretly being a terrified child, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Now I am 19, a university student living in a small dorm room, a world away from the home where I lost everything, and yet the distance is merely physical. For the past is always with me, a roommate I can never escape. I have learned to manage the nightmares, for the most part. And I have a girlfriend, a wonderful, patient girl who knows the truth and loves me despite it, or perhaps because of it. And for the first time in a long time, I have allowed myself to feel a glimmer of hope for the future. But the fear is still there, a low hum beneath the surface of my life, and sometimes, on quiet nights, when the dorm is empty and the only sound is the hum of the refrigerator, I can still hear those footsteps on the stairs, slow and deliberate, and I can still feel the presence of the man behind me, his breath a warm, terrifying whisper on my neck. I know that I will never be truly free, that the message written in my parents' blood is a part of my DNA now, a permanent stain on my soul. But I am no longer just a survivor who pretended to be asleep. I am a young man who has looked into the face of absolute evil and has chosen to keep living, to keep fighting. And while the memory of that night will always be a part of me, it no longer has to be the only thing that defines me. For I am more than the boy who was left behind. I am the man who chose to walk forward, one step at a time, into the light, carrying the memory of my parents not as a burden of fear, but as a source of strength, a reminder of the love that was stolen, and the life I am determined to honor by living it as fully and as bravely as I possibly can.